Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. Before I begin, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. Now, let's get into it. My daughter told me I wasn't welcome at her wedding. She said my presence would be embarrassing and wouldn't fit the elegant, upscale aesthetic she and her fiancé were creating. So, I respected her wishes. I stayed away, but I did send my gift. I sent it by helicopter right in the middle of her champagne reception. It wasn't the gift she was expecting. My daughter, Jessica, was my only child. I'd raised her myself after my wife passed away when Jessica was just a toddler. It was always just the two of us against the world, or so I thought. I'm not a flashy man. I run a moderately successful construction business, a company I built from the ground up with my own two hands. We were always comfortable. Jessica never wanted for anything essential, but I made sure she understood the value of work. She had chores. She had a part-time job in high school. I thought I had raised her right, with a good head on her shoulders and a kind heart. The first signs of trouble began when she went to college, a good private university that I was proud to pay for. She fell in with a crowd that valued labels over character and inheritance over effort. It was there she met Chad. Chad was the dictionary definition of entitlement. He came from a family that had old money, but from what I could gather, the money was mostly gone, and only the attitude remained. He coasted through life on his family name and a smug sense of superiority. He treated service staff like they were invisible and spoke of his future as if it were a preordained coronation. I disliked him from the moment I met him. He had a limp handshake, and he didn't look me in the eye. He called me by my first name, not out of familiarity, but out of a casual disrespect, as if acknowledging me as Mr. Henderson would be too much of an effort. Jessica, however, was smitten. She saw his arrogance as confidence, his laziness as a relaxed charm. She began to change. My daughter, who once volunteered at soup kitchens with me on Thanksgiving, started making comments about the sort of people you find in certain parts of town. She traded her jeans and sweatshirts for designer clothes I knew she couldn't afford on her own, charged to a credit card I'd given her for emergencies and books. When they announced their engagement, I tried to be happy for her. I hosted a dinner at my home, the home Jessica grew up in. Chad spent the entire evening scrolling on his phone, occasionally showing Jessica a picture of a yacht or a $1 million watch, whispering about goals. The first big ask came a week later. They sat me down in my own living room, a meticulously prepared slideshow ready on Jessica's laptop. It was a presentation for their wedding. They wanted something, in their words, truly spectacular, a statement. The venue was a historic estate that cost more to rent for a day than my first house cost to buy. The guest list was filled with Chad's influential friends and their parents. The caterer they wanted was a celebrity chef. The budget they presented to me was astronomical. It was the price of a small fleet of my best construction vehicles. I looked at the numbers, then I looked at my daughter. Jess, I said, trying to keep my voice even, this is a lot. This is more than a wedding. This is a production. Chad scoffed, a little puff of air through his perfectly sculpted nostrils. It's an investment, Frank, he said, using my first name again like a weapon. You have to project success to be successful. It's about networking. Jessica chimed in, her voice taking on a whiny, pleading tone I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. Daddy, please. This is my one day. I want it to be perfect. All of Chad's friends have weddings like this. I don't want to be the one with the, budget wedding. The phrase hung in the air, thick with judgment. A budget wedding, like the simple, heartfelt ceremony her mother and I had in a small church, surrounded by people who genuinely loved us. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I told them I would cover the costs. I love my daughter, and the thought of her being happy, even a manufactured happiness I didn't understand, was enough to make me open my wallet. I rationalized it. I'd done well for myself, far better than anyone, including my daughter, knew. My moderately successful construction business was a bit of an understatement. I had diversified years ago, investing heavily in commercial real estate and some tech startups that had paid off handsomely. I was a wealthy man, but I never lived like one. I still drove a 10-year-old pickup truck. I still lived in the same comfortable but by no means extravagant house. I didn't see the point in flaunting it. Wealth was a tool for security, for freedom, for helping others. To Jessica and Chad, it was clearly just a scorecard. The planning process was a nightmare. Every decision was about one-upmanship. The flowers had to be flown in from Holland. The champagne had to be a specific vintage that cost hundreds per bottle. My involvement was limited to receiving the invoices. My opinions were not solicited. When I gently questioned a particularly absurd expense, a live butterfly release, Jessica had sighed dramatically. "Dad, you just don't get it. This is how it's done. Please don't make this difficult." So I stepped back. I paid the deposits. I signed the checks. I was the silent financier, the faceless bank account behind the grand spectacle. The inciting incident, the moment the world shifted on its axis, came 2 weeks before the wedding. I was in my office, reviewing blueprints for a new community center I was funding when my phone rang. It was Jessica. Her voice was strange, a forced, airy brightness. "Hi, Daddy," she chirped. "So, Chad and I were having a little chat, and we've made a small change to the plan for the big day." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "What sort of change?" I asked. There was a pause. I could hear Chad whispering in the background. "Well," she began, "we were looking at the guest list and the seating plan, and with all of Chad's family, friends, and business contacts coming, it's just a very specific vibe we're going for." "Get to the point, Jessica," I said, my patience wearing thin. She took a deep breath. "We were thinking, and please don't take this the wrong way, that it might be better if you didn't actually attend the ceremony. Or the reception." The silence on the line was deafening. I honestly thought I had misheard her. "You're uninviting me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "From your wedding? The wedding I am paying for." "It's not like that," she said quickly, defensively. "It's just, you'd be there by yourself. You don't know any of our friends. In your style, it's very down to earth. Chad's parents are very particular. We just want everything to be seamless. You can see the pictures and the video. It'll be just like you were there." Seamless. That was the word she used. My presence. The presence of her father, the man who raised her, who was funding this entire circus, would disrupt the seamless aesthetic. I was a loose thread on her designer gown. "And what about walking you down the aisle, Jess?" I thought that was something we always talked about. Her answer gutted me. "Oh," she said, as if it were a minor detail she'd forgotten. "Chad's father, Charles, offered to do it. It makes more sense from an optics standpoint. The two families merging, Optics. My role as her father had been reduced to bad optics. I didn't shout. I didn't curse. The initial wave of white-hot rage and profound hurt was so overwhelming it left me strangely calm. Something inside me, a warm and loving part that had been reserved exclusively for her, turned to ice. "I see," I said, my voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "Well, I understand. It's your day. You should have it exactly the way you want it." "Oh, thank you, Daddy," she said, the relief in her voice sickening. "I knew you'd understand. You're the best. We'll come by next week to pick up the final check for the venue." And she hung up. I sat there in my office, the blueprints for the community center blurring in front of my eyes. For the first time, I saw my daughter not as the little girl I adored, but as the person she had become, a shallow, ungrateful stranger who saw me not as her father, but as a resource to be tapped. She had mistaken my quiet generosity for weakness. She and Chad had mistaken my love for a blank check. They believed they were entitled to my wealth, to the fruits of my life's work, without being burdened by the man who had earned it. And in that cold, quiet moment, the turning point arrived. The hurt was still there, a deep, throbbing wound. But beneath it, a new feeling was crystallizing. Resolve. A cold, hard, diamond-sharp resolve. The phrase "actions have consequences" echoed in my mind. She wanted a wedding without me. Fine, she would get it. But she would also get a life without my support. The bank was closing. Permanently. The next morning, I didn't go to my construction office. Instead, I went to a different office, the sleek, downtown firm of my lawyer, David. David has been my lawyer and friend for 20 years. He knew the truth of my financial situation. He was the one who helped me set up the very accounts and assets that Jessica was now taking for granted. I walked in, sat down, and laid it all out. The wedding. the budget, the phone call. His face, usually jovial, hardened as I spoke. When I finished with the part about being uninvited, he just shook his head slowly. "Frank," he said, "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry, don't be." I replied, my voice steady. "I'm not. I'm done being sorry. I'm done being a doormat. Now, I need your help to methodically and legally dismantle the entire financial structure my daughter believes is her birthright." A slow smile spread across David's face. "Frank," he said, "this is the kind of work I live for. Let's get started. What's first on the list?" I pulled out a notepad. I had been up all night. My grief had morphed into a project plan. "First," I said, the charming 4-bedroom house that Jessica and Chad had been living in for the past year wasn't theirs. They told their friends they had bought it, a starter home. The truth was it was my house. I had bought it as an investment property years ago. I had let them live there, rent-free, to help them save up for their future, a future they were now using my money to fund while telling me I wasn't good enough to be a part of it. "The deed is solely in my name, correct?" I asked David. He pulled up the file on his computer. "Ironclad. Your name only. They have no legal claim to it whatsoever." "Good," I said. "I want you to draw up eviction papers. Standard 30-day notice. We'll have it served the day after the wedding. Furthermore, I want to transfer the ownership of that property into a new holding company that is, for all intents and purposes, invisible to them." Next on the list was the car. Chad drove a brand new luxury SUV. He loved to show it off, telling everyone it was a bonus from his consulting job, which was a fiction he'd created to sound important. The car was not his. It was mine. It was registered in my name, and I made the monthly payments. "Cancel the automatic payments effective immediately," I told David. "And I want to arrange for the car to be repossessed. Or better yet, I'll just go pick it up myself. I have a spare key." Then, the lifeblood of their extravagant lifestyle, the credit card. The emergency card I had given Jessica in college had morphed into their primary source of funding for dinners, clothes, and weekend trips. The monthly bills were staggering, but I had paid them without comment, foolishly believing I was helping her maintain a certain standard of living while she and Chad got on their feet. The card was in her name, but it was a supplementary card linked to my master account. I was the one who was solely responsible for the bill. "That one's easy," I said. "I'll call the bank and have the card canceled immediately." Finally, the biggest piece of the puzzle. The trust fund. This was the grand prize they were waiting for. My father had left me a significant amount of money, which I had grown tenfold through my investments. I had set up a trust for Jessica, which she was due to inherit a substantial portion of on her 30th birthday, a few years away. They spoke of this money as if it were already in their bank account. It was the foundation of all their future plans for yachts and world travel. "David," I said, "I want to restructure my entire estate. The trust for Jessica needs to be dissolved. Completely. I want every penny that was designated for her to be redirected. I want to set up a new charitable foundation, the Henderson Foundation for Second Chances. It will provide scholarships for trade schools and grants for underprivileged kids who want to learn a craft. The kind of people Jessica and Chad would look down their noses at." David listened, taking meticulous notes. He advised me on every step, ensuring it was all legal, binding, and irreversible. We spent the entire day in his office. I signed papers. I made phone calls. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were managing a hostile corporate takeover. I was liquidating my emotional investment in my daughter. With each signature, I felt a weight lift. The hurt was still there, a dull ache in the background, but the feeling of being a victim was gone. I was no longer a passive financier. I was in control. The plan was methodical. It was precise, and it was final. The week leading up to the wedding was quiet. Jessica called once. "Hey, Daddy. Just wanted to remind you to drop off the final check for the estate rental. It's due tomorrow. You can just leave it in the mailbox if you want." Her voice was breezy, casual. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't mention the uninvitation. It was a purely transactional call. "I'll take care of it," I said, and hung up. I did write a check. I wrote it from my personal account, and I drove it over to their house, my house. I put it in the mailbox as requested. It felt like the last act of a long, sad play. As I drove away, I looked at the luxury SUV in the driveway, my SUV. Soon I thought. The day before the wedding, I put the final pieces of the plan into motion. First, I called the credit card company. I identified myself, went through the security questions, and reported the supplementary card with Jessica's name on it as no longer authorized. I want it deactivated immediately. Please, I said. The agent confirmed the card was now just a useless piece of plastic. Next, I drove my old pickup truck to a coffee shop a few blocks from the house. I took out my spare key to the SUV, walked over, got in, and drove it away. I parked it in the long-term garage at my main office, hidden away behind a fleet of excavators and dump trucks. The final call was to my lawyer, David. Everything is in place. I asked. The documents are prepared. The process server is on standby. The helicopter is booked, he confirmed. Frank, are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I said. Actions have consequences. The wedding day arrived. It was a beautiful, sunny Saturday. I spent the morning at the site for the new community center, talking with the foreman. My phone started buzzing around 2 p.m. and it was Jessica. I ignored it. A minute later, a text came through. Dad, call me. The caterer's card was declined. I looked at the text and felt nothing. I put the phone on silent. Over the next hour, a cascade of texts and missed calls followed. They were a timeline of dawning panic. Dad, seriously, where are you? The florist needs their final payment. The card isn't working. Chad tried his card too. It was also declined. What's going on? I'm trying to transfer money from my account, but it says insufficient funds. This one was telling. She must have been trying to use the savings account I topped up for her every month. An allowance I had also stopped. Dad, pick up the phone. The wedding planner is threatening to walk out. Then came the frantic calls from Chad. I didn't have his number saved, but the unfamiliar number called 7 times in a row. I let it go to voicemail. He actually left a message, which I listened to later. It was a sputtering, indignant rant. Frank, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you're ruining Jessica's big day. The coordinator for the butterfly release says she's taking her butterflies and leaving. You need to fix this right now. The butterfly coordinator. That was the detail that almost made me laugh. The unraveling was happening faster than I'd imagined. Their entire fantasy, built on a foundation of my money, was collapsing in real time because they had no actual resources of their own. The final text from Jessica came around 4 p.m., just before the ceremony was supposed to start. The car is gone. Someone stole the car. We have no way to get to the venue. I hate you. You've ruined everything. I looked at the words, I hate you, a month ago. They would have shattered me. Now they just seemed pathetic. You don't hate me, I thought. You hate that the ATM is closed. I knew from the wedding planner schedule, which they had so helpfully left at my house, that the reception was due to start at 6 p.m. on the grand lawn of the estate. They must have scraped together enough cash or convinced the venue manager to let the ceremony proceed. Promising payment was on the way. The illusion had to be maintained at all costs. At 6:15 p.m., I gave David the final go-ahead. The helicopter pilot knew his instructions. He was to fly over the estate, low and slow. He wasn't delivering cash. He was delivering a single, elegant gift box attached to a small, weighted parachute. From my vantage point at a nearby park, I watched through binoculars as the chopper appeared in the sky. I could imagine the scene on the ground. The guests, holding their glasses of inferior, hastily purchased Prosecco instead of the vintage champagne they'd been promised, would look up, confused. Jessica and Chad, already stressed and humiliated, would probably think I had come through at the last minute. That this was my grand, theatrical apology, a delivery of the money they so desperately needed. The box drifted down, landing softly in the center of the lawn. I had instructed the pilot to make sure it was unmistakable. A single spotlight from the helicopter illuminated it. I could picture Chad striding towards it, a smug look of relief returning to his face. He would open it in front of everyone, expecting stacks of cash or a cashier's check. But that's not what he found. Inside the box were 4 items. First, the cut-up pieces of the credit card. Second, the keys to the luxury SUV, attached to a keychain that said, my TOY. Third, a set of keys to the house they lived in, my house, along with a legally executed notice of eviction, giving them 30 days to vacate the premises. The final item was a single, heavy sheet of paper. It was a letter from me. I had rewritten it a dozen times, but settled on something simple, direct, and cold. It read, "Dearest Jessica and Chad, congratulations on your wedding day. I am sorry I cannot be there, but as you said, my presence would not have fit the vibe. You also said that my role in your life was purely financial, so I have decided to honor that by making this my final transaction. The items in this box represent the end of my financial support. The card is canceled. The car, which is mine, has been repossessed. The house, which is also mine, is being sold. You have 30 days to find a new place to live. All future payments, allowances, and access to any of my accounts are terminated, effective immediately. The trust fund you were expecting in the future has been dissolved and its assets redirected to a new charitable foundation that will help people who, unlike you, are truly in need. You wanted a wedding that was a statement and an investment. You have certainly made a statement about your character, and you must now learn to invest in yourselves. You are free from the embarrassment of your down-to-earth father. You're on your own. I wish you the best. Actions have consequences. Sincerely, Frank Henderson, your father." I didn't need to be there to see the aftermath. David had a contact among the catering staff who gave him a full report. The scene was one of utter pandemonium. Chad read the letter, his face going from confusion to shock to ghostly white. Jessica snatched it from him, her eyes scanning the page before she let out a wail of despair. The guests, their curiosity piqued, began to murmur and move closer. The news spread through the crowd like fire through a dry field. The entitled son of a prestigious family and his beautiful bride were, in fact, broke. They were frauds, living a life funded entirely by the father they had just scorned and banished. The networking opportunity had become a public shaming. Many of Chad's so-called influential friends and their parents, smelling a social liability, made quiet, hasty exits. The party was over before it ever truly began. The aftermath was exactly as I had planned. They called me hundreds of times. They sent walls of text, first angry and threatening, then pleading and apologetic. I blocked their numbers. They showed up at my house, but I had already changed the locks. They tried to go to my office, but I had instructed my staff that they were not to be allowed on the premises. They were forced to move out of the house at the end of the 30 days. I heard through the grapevine that they were living in a small, cramped apartment on the bad side of town, the kind of place they used to make fun of. Chad had to get a real job, working in sales at a car dealership. Jessica was working as a hostess in a restaurant. They had to sell most of their designer clothes and expensive wedding gifts to make rent. They had learned, in the harshest way possible, the true value of a dollar. As for me, I found peace. The wound of my daughter's betrayal will likely never fully heal, but the bitterness is gone. It was replaced by a sense of calm justice. I poured my energy and my money into the new foundation. The Henderson Foundation for Second Chances has already provided scholarships to dozens of young men and women, helping them build real lives with real skills. I attend their graduation ceremonies. I see the gratitude in their eyes. They're the children I choose to invest in now. Every now and then, I drive my old pickup truck past the fancy restaurant where Jessica works. I don't do it to gloat. I do it to remind myself that actions have consequences for them and for me. My action was to finally respect myself, and the consequence was freedom. I am free from their entitlement, their disrespect, and the burden of a love that was not returned. And that is a gift far greater than any wedding present. So that's my story. It's a hard lesson, but a necessary one. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is to let their children face the world they have created for themselves. Thank you for listening. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.